Hello. Welcome to Phantom Homicide, then the topic. Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield.
Hello. Yeah, this is one of those cases that really gets under your skin. Edward Theodore Gain, born 1906, died 84. And what's so uniquely disturbing about Gain isn't like the sheer number of people he killed. He was only definitively linked to two murders.
Right, that's crucial. He's sometimes called the Plainfield Ghoul, but unlike a lot of the killers we look at, his infamy doesn't come from, a massive body count. It's all entirely about what he did after death. The body snatching, the grave robbing, and then the crafting, making
Yeah.
things from human remains,
Yes.
trophies, household items. It's just, it breaches that final taboo, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, our mission in this deep dive, looking all the sources, the biographical stuff, the psych reports, those incredibly detailed crime scene inventories, court records, is to try and figure out, how does someone get there? How does this quiet, kind of eccentric handyman living out in rural Wisconsin turn into that? The guy whose crimes basically rewrote the definition of the monster in popular culture?
And the setting. Plainfield, Wisconsin, it makes it even more chilling, I think. This tiny, isolated farming town, it just, fields and quiet. And then 1957 happens, and the whole place is just shattered. Because Gein wasn't some outsider. He was Eddie. Quiet Eddie, the odd farmer who lived alone after his mom died.
Did odd jobs, handyman stuff, worked on the road crew for the town.
And this is the part that always gets me. He sometimes babysat for neighbors. Apparently, he got along better with kids than adults. It's just, the horror was right there, hidden completely in plain sight, masked by that assumption of, rural normalcy.
Yeah, you really have to dig into the family to even begin to understand the pathology. Edward Theodore Gain, born August 27, 1906, La Crosse County. Second son, older brother Henry. Parents George and Augusta.
And that family dynamic,
Yeah.
it wasn't just dysfunctional. It sounds like a pressure cooker.
Totally. You had the father, George Philip Gein. He was, well, pretty ineffectual, an alcoholic. Sources say he worked different jobs, carpenter, tanner, even owned a grocery store for a bit. But he was also abusive. Apparently beat young Ed hard enough sometimes to make his ears ring. But ultimately, Augusta was the one in charge, completely.
Augusta, Wilhelmine, the mother. Now she sounds like the central figure. Fanatically religious Lutheran, technically,
Yeah.
but her version was extremely puritanical, punitive.
Oh, yeah. Constantly preaching about how the world was inherently immoral, corrupt, and her focus was almost entirely on women.
Right. She believed all women except herself, of course, were naturally promiscuous. Instruments of the devil, basically, designed to tempt men.
And this wasn't just like a belief system, it was policy. The family moved to that isolated farm, 155 acres, sometimes listed as 195 near Plainfield, specifically for that reason.
She wanted to isolate the boys, Ed and Henry, from what she called outside influence, keep them pure under her control.
And she hammered it home. Every afternoon, she'd sit them down and read from the Bible, but not the nice parts.
No, it was always the heavy stuff, right? Old Testament, Book of Revelation, death, murder, divine judgment, hellfire. The message was pretty clear. The world's evil, women are traps, stick close to mom.
And Ed bought into it completely. He didn't just love his mother, he worshipped her, became obsessed.
He was super shy, couldn't make friends. Augusta apparently punished him if he even tried. School records say he was okay at reading, but had these weird habits like laughing to himself for no reason.
Like he was tuned into a different frequency or something. It's just, you can see the isolation building, the dependency becoming total.
And then the supports just start getting kicked out from under him one by one.
Exactly. First, the father, George, dies in 1940, heart failure, age 66. Even though he wasn't much of a presence, it still shifted things.
Then comes Henry's death in 1944. This one is suspicious, to say the least.
Very. The story is they were burning marsh grass, the fire got out of control. Ed reported Henry missing after the fire crew left. They found Henry's body face down.
Official cause of death.
Oh, cruise.
Asphyxiation from the fire.
Not.
But there's more to it.
There is. Henry had started to push back against Augusta. He was critical of her, apparently said things to Ed about her dominance. And Ed reacted badly shocked, hurt that anyone would criticize his mother.
And the physical evidence. Harold Schechter's biography mentions bruises found on Henry's head.
Uh-huh.
But incredibly, back then, no official investigation, no autopsy, case closed, just like that.
It wasn't until 1957, when they were questioning Guy about everything else, that investigator Jerry Lemofsky brought up Henry's death again. Gein passed lie detectors on the other unsolved cases, but the suspicion about Henry lingered.
Some scholars, like George Arndt, later called it the potential Cain and Abel aspect. Maybe Ed removed the one person challenging his total devotion to Augusta.
It's impossible to know for sure, but it fits the pattern. After Henry died, Augusta had a stroke, became paralyzed. And Ed, he became her full-time, utterly devoted caretaker, lived only for her.
There's that story he told about visiting a man named Smith to buy straw. Augusta saw Smith beating a dog, but what really set her off was seeing a woman in Smith's house.
Right. Because the woman wasn't married to Smith, Augusta immediately denounced her as Smith's harlot. Even paralyzed, her obsession with female sin was unwavering.
And then, the final blow. December 29, 1945. Augusta dies after a second stroke. She was 67.
For Ed, who had basically no identity outside of her, it was devastating. Schechter put it perfectly. Finn had lost his only friend and one true love, and he was absolutely alone in the world.
The immediate aftermath shows how broken he was. He kept the farm, but he sealed off her rooms, her bedroom upstairs, the downstairs parlor, the living room, boarded them up, left them untouched, like a shrine.
A time capsule of his obsession. Meanwhile, he retreated to this tiny, squalid little room next to the kitchen, and his living conditions just mirrored his mental state, increasingly chaotic, filthy. The breakdown was becoming physical.
So after Augusta's death, things outwardly seemed maybe normalish for a while.
Yeah, for a couple of years, between 45 and maybe 47, he sort of kept things going. He needed money, so he did odd jobs, handyman work, still did some babysitting, worked for the town on the road crew.
He got a federal farm subsidy starting in 51, sold off Henry's piece of land, just kind of existed. But inside, his focus was shifting, was it?
Big time. His reading habits changed drastically. No more Bible verses. Now it was pulp magazines, adventure stories, but specifically ones featuring cannibals, Nazi atrocities. Really dark stuff.
And that's where the Ilse Koch connection comes in, right? The Bitch of Buchenwald.
Exactly. He became fascinated with the stories about her accused of having prisoners killed so she could make things like lampshades from their tattooed skin.
It's like he was finding a blueprint, seeing human remains not as something sacred, but as material, craft supplies. It's horrifying foreshadowing.
And this is when the Plainfield ghoul activities really start, the nighttime trips to the cemeteries. Around 1947.
He confessed to this later, visiting local graveyards at night.
Yeah, he admitted to making as many as 40 trips to 3 different cemeteries between 47 and 52. But the state he described himself being in is interesting.
He said he was often in a daze-like state, sort of dissociated.
Right, like he wasn't fully conscious of what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he claimed that on about 30 of those trips, he'd suddenly kind of wake up, realize what he was doing, maybe tidy the grave a bit, and just go home, empty-handed.
So he only actually went through with it, exhumed a body maybe 10 times.
Around 10 times, yeah. But his targets were very specific. It wasn't random. He went after recently buried middle-aged women, women who physically resembled Augusta.
So it wasn't about stealing valuables, it was about finding replacements or parts.
Exactly. It was driven by that pathological need. Authorities at first were skeptical, Gein was this kind of slight, awkward guy. Could he really dig up a grave, haul out a casket, get the body, cover his tracks all by himself in the dark?
It sounds like a massive undertaking.
It is, but his confessions were incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
The state crime lab investigator, Alan Wilmofsky, decided to test his story. They dug up 3 graves, Gein pointed out, and Gein was right about everything. The graves had been disturbed shortly after burial. He knew exactly how they were constructed, the casket inside a wooden box, the top boards laid crossways. He knew how deep they were buried in that sandy Plainfield soil, only about 2 feet down.
Wow. So the test graves confirmed it.
Absolutely. One grave was empty, another was empty except for a few bones and Gain's own crowbar left behind. The third was mostly empty, but he'd apparently returned some rings and a few body parts. The level of detail proved he was telling the truth. He was the body snatcher.
Okay, so he brings these bodies back to the farm. What did he do with them? He denied necrophilia, right?
Explicitly denied it. His explanation was chillingly practical. They smelled too bad.
Wow. But again, you have to see it through his psychological lens, don't you?
Definitely. Sex was terrifying to him thanks to Augusta. He was reportedly impotent anyway. This wasn't about sexual gratification in the usual sense. It was about transformation, possession.
Which leads us to the woman suit.
The ultimate grotesque project. He started crafting items from human skin. A vest, basically, made from a female torso. Sometimes with breasts, even female genitalia still attached.
It wasn't just a costume. It was an attempt to become her.
Psychologically, yes. To literally crawl into her skin, as some put it. to merge with the lost mother he was obsessed with. The masks, the skin upholstery, the bowls made from skulls, it was all part of this desperate, deranged project to use the female body as raw material to reconstruct his own identity around Augusta's memory.
So we go from grave robbing, this hidden nocturnal horror, to actual murder.
The escalation happens later. The first murder we know he committed was Mary Hogan, 1954.
She owned a tavern, right? 51 years old.
That's right. Disappeared December 8th, 1954. Gein later admitted shooting her with a .32 caliber revolver, but again, he claimed fuzzy memory, like he was in a daze, said he couldn't recall the specifics.
But they found evidence at his farm later.
They found her head, well, her skull, and a face mask made from her skin. That pretty much confirmed his involvement.
And then 3 years go by before the final victim, Bernice Worden.
November 16th, 1957. Bernice Worden, 58 years old, owned the hardware store in Plainfield. She vanished that morning. Her store truck was seen driving away around 9:30 a.m.
And her son, Frank Worden, who was also a deputy sheriff, he's the one who broke the case.
He is. He went to the store around 5 p.m., found bloodstains, the cash register open, and he immediately thought of Gein.
Why Gein specifically?
Because he remembered Gein had been in the store the night before. And the very last sales slip Bernice wrote was for a gallon of antifreeze Gein was supposed to pick up that morning. That little detail, the antifreeze slip pointed right at him.
So they arrested Gein pretty quickly after that.
That same evening. Picked him up at a grocery store in West Plainfield. The sheriff's department then drove out to the farm and walked into a nightmare.
The first thing they found was Bernice Worden's body in the shed.
Yeah, hung upside down by the ankles and wrists, decapitated,
And
dressed out like a deer, as the reports famously stated. She'd been shot with a .22 rifle, but all the mutilations happened after she was dead.
it's just horrific. And that was only the beginning. The house. The inventory from the house is just beyond belief.
It really is, and we need to go through it because it shows the depth of the depravity, the sheer domesticity of the horror.
Okay, so remains.
Yeah.
They found whole human bones, fragment, just scattered around.
Skulls mounted on his bedposts, like trophies. Other female skulls, some with the tops sawn off. He intended to use them as bowls.
Bowls. And the skin? Items made of skin.
A wastebasket. Chairs upholstered with human skin. And maybe the most infamous item, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face.
Oh, God. Just stretched over the frame.
Apparently. Then there were the items related to the woman suit fantasy. The corset or waistcoat made from a female torso, skin from shoulders to waist. Leggings made from human leg skin.
And the smaller trophies.
Yeah.
The collections.
9 vulvas stored in a shoebox. Analysis suggested 2 were from females maybe around 15 years old. 4 noses. A pair of lips used as a pull for a window shade.
Lips on a window shade pull.
And a belt made from human nipples. Female nipples.
It's just, the level of detail is sickening. And specific victim remains.
Mary Hogan's face mask was in a paper bag. Her skull was in a box. Bernice Worden's head was in a burlap sack. And her heart. They found her heart in a plastic bag sitting in front of the potbelly stove.
Her heart.
Yeah.
Just left there. It wasn't frenzied violence, was it?
Yeah,
Feels
yeah.
almost methodical, clinical.
That's the chilling part. It was like a workshop. After everything was documented, photographed at the state crime lab, the sources say the remains were eventually decently disposed of. The physical evidence was gone, but the psychological impact, immense.
What about the shrunken heads story? That pops up a lot.
Right. A local teenager reported seeing them. Gein claimed they were souvenirs from a cousin in the Philippines during the war, but the police figured out they weren't actual shrunken heads.
They were the face masks.
Exactly. Human facial skin peeled off carefully and used as masks by Gein. The reality was just as disturbing as the myth, maybe more so because it was real.
Okay, so with all this evidence found at the farm, investigators must have immediately thought he was responsible for other missing persons cases in the area, right?
Absolutely. Suddenly, Gein looked like a potential suspect in a whole string of unsolved disappearances that happened between 1945, when Augusta died, and 1957, when Bernice Worden was killed.
This is a huge question. Was he just a grave robber who escalated twice, or was he a serial killer hiding in plain sight?
Let's run through the main ones they looked at. First, Georgia Jean Weckler, an 8-year-old girl who disappeared near Fort Atkinson back in May 1947.
That's early on, right after he supposedly started the grave robbing. Was there a link?
Witnesses saw a dark 1936 or 37 Ford sedan near where she vanished. Gein owned a black 1937 Ford. It was circumstantial, but suspicious.
Okay, who else?
Victor Harold Travis, 42, and his friend Raymond Burgess. They disappeared together in November 1952, vanished along with Burgess's car after drinking at Mac's bar.
The key detail there.
They were known to hunt on land right next to Gein's farm, and Gein apparently didn't like them being there. So there was a potential motive, maybe unrelated to his usual pathology. Property dispute, maybe?
Then there was the Evelyn Grace Hartley case. That one got a lot of attention.
It did. She was 14, missing from La Crosse in October 1953. She was babysitting. Her father found the house, disturbed signs of a struggle, things overturned, glasses broken. A real mess.
Did they connect into that?
They questioned him heavily. He denied everything, and crucially, he passed 2 separate lie detector tests regarding Hartley.
Oh, one more.
James Walsh, a neighbor, 32 years old, went missing in June 1954. Gein actually did chores for Mrs. Walsh after her husband disappeared. Again, suspicious proximity.
But ultimately, he wasn't charged with any of these.
No. Despite the suspicions, he passed lie detectors on most of them. And the psychological profile that emerged suggested his violence was really targeted almost exclusively at women who reminded him of his mother. That didn't quite fit the profile for all these missing people, especially the men and the young girl. Without confessions or hard evidence, they couldn't link him definitively.
Okay, so back to the Worden case.
Mm-hmm.
The legal process, it hit a snag early on, didn't it? The confession.
Yeah, big snag. When Gein was first interrogated, the sheriff, Art Schley, reportedly got rough with him, apparently banged Gein's head and face against a brick wall.
Oh, wow. So that initial confession
Was ruled inadmissible, tainted by the assault. This was a major blow to the prosecution because that first confession was apparently quite detailed and corroborated a lot of the physical evidence.
and Sheriff Schley, the whole thing affected him deeply.
Terribly. Sources say he was traumatized by what he saw at the farm, and probably by the fear of having to testify about the assault on Gein. He died of heart failure in 1968 at just 43 years old, before Gein's trial even started.
So Gein's legal journey took a while.
A long while. He was arraigned November 21st, 1957, pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Doctors quickly diagnosed him with schizophrenia, found him mentally incompetent to stand trial.
So he was institutionalized right away.
Yep. Sent first to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane in Waupun, then later moved to Mendota State Hospital in Madison. He stayed there for a decade.
10 years. Until 1968.
Right. In '68, doctors finally decided he was mentally able to understand the proceedings and assist in his own defense. So the trial finally happened November 7th to 14th, 1968.
Judge Robert H. Golmar presided. And it was a bench trial, no jury.
Correct. At the defense's request, the trial itself was pretty quick, only a week.
What was the defense strategy?
They argued the Worden killing was basically an accident. Gein claimed the rifle just went off while he was looking at it. And then he claimed total amnesia for everything that happened afterwards. The mutilation, transport, all of it. The psychiatrist couldn't definitively say if the initial shot was intentional or accidental. It muddied the water.
So the verdict.
It was a 2-part process. First, Judge Golmar found Gein guilty of the first-degree murder of Bernice Worden. But then, in the second phase, based on all the psychiatric testimony about his long-standing mental illness, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Guilty but insane. So back to the institution.
For life, he was committed back to psychiatric care. Judge Golmar later said they only prosecuted the Worden murder because trying him for Mary Hogan or the grave robberies would have been incredibly expensive and complex, especially since the insanity verdict was likely inevitable anyway.
So that verdict really rested on the psychological profile. What were the key findings?
Well, the official diagnoses were schizophrenia and severe personality disorder, but the core driver, everyone agreed, was this incredibly pathological, edible fixation on Augusta.
Everything traced back to her. The grave robbing targeted women who looked like her.
Exactly. Trying to replace her, possess her, resurrect her in some way. And the artifacts, especially that woman's suit.
That was the ultimate expression of it, trying to literally become her.
It seems so. An attempt to merge identities, to incorporate her. And layered on top of that was profound sexual confusion and dysfunction, rooted in her fanatical puritanism. He was reportedly impotent. So the mutilation, turning body parts into objects. It wasn't just random. It reflected this deep hostility towards female anatomy, which he was both terrified of and fascinated by, combined with that clinical, detached approach. It was a perfect storm of isolation, obsession, and psychosis.
With Gein locked away, what happened to the farm? that house of horrors?
Well, the property, the 195 acres, the buildings was appraised at about $4,700. They scheduled an auction for March 30 in 1958. But there was a lot of local anxiety, People were worried it would become some kind of morbid tourist trap.
Amen.
10 days before the auction, March 20th, 1958, the house burned to the ground, gone.
Arson.
Widely suspected, never proven.
Right.
The deputy fire marshal noted there was a garbage fire burning about 75 feet away, but the fire didn't seem to have spread along the ground to the house. It suggested someone might have helped it along.
And Frank Warden, Bernice's son, was the fire chief then.
He was. There are whispers, maybe apocryphal, that he wasn't exactly rushing to put out the fire. Maybe saw it as a necessary cleansing for the town. We don't know for sure.
What was Gein's reaction when he heard the house burn down?
Just 2 words. Just as well. Chillingly detached. The physical epicenter of his crimes was gone.
But not all the physical remnants disappeared, right? What about his car?
Yes. The black 1937 Ford sedan. The car he used to transport bodies, the car linked to Bernice Warden's disappearance, that was sold at public auction, went for $760.
Who bought it?
A carnival sideshow operator named Bunny Gibbons. And he immediately turned it into an attraction.
You're kidding. He put the car on display?
Yep. Toured it around fairs and carnivals, charged people 25 cents just to look at Ed Gein's ghoul car. It became this traveling piece of notoriety, keeping the story alive in a really macabre way.
So Gein himself lived out his days in institutions.
Pretty much. Mostly at the Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison. By all accounts, he was a quiet, polite patient. Cooperative. Some even called him a model patient.
Strange contrast to his crimes. How long did he live?
He died on July 26, 1984. He was 77. Cause of death was respiratory failure, apparently linked to lung cancer.
Where was he buried?
Back in Plainfield Cemetery, right next to Augusta, George, and Henry, his family.
Did he have a gravestone?
He did, initially. But souvenir hunters kept chipping pieces off it, constantly vandalizing it. Eventually, in 2000, the whole stone was stolen. It was recovered later, but officials decided to keep it in storage. So now, his grave is unmarked. A strangely anonymous end. But his real legacy, his immortality, that's in culture. Gein's case fundamentally changed how we saw monsters.
How so?
Before Gein, maybe the idea of such extreme horror felt distant. But he proved it could come from anywhere. From the quiet guy next door, the local handyman. He basically created the archetype of the modern psycho killer that lives among us.
And the influence on fiction was almost immediate, wasn't it? Starting with Psycho.
Absolutely. Robert Bloch, who wrote the novel Psycho in 1959, lived relatively close by in Wisconsin. He was directly inspired by the Gein case, the isolation, the overpowering mother fixation, the confusion of identity. Norman Bates is Ed Gein, essentially, filtered through fiction.
And Hitchcock's film in 1960 just cemented that forever.
Totally. And then Gein's influence kind of branches out. You see the mask making and the furniture made of human remains inspiring Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974.
Right, the skin mask and the bone furniture.
Yeah.
Direct echoes.
And then the other branch is the deeper psychological motivation, the desire to become a woman by wearing skin. That clearly inspired Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, crafting the woman's suit.
It's amazing how one case could spawn so many iconic horror figures.
And there were more direct adaptations, too, like the movies Deranged or Ed Gein. His fingerprints are all over TV horror as well. Dr. Thredson in American Horror Story. Asylum is basically Gein. Even music references him. Bands like Slayer, Tad, Blind Melon wrote songs about him. He became a cultural shorthand for ultimate depravity.
So wrapping this up, Gein's case was more than just a series of horrific crimes. It was a landmark moment.
Definitely. It forced a hard look at the impact of extreme maternal domination, extreme isolation. It changed how the legal system dealt with criminal psychopathology, the insanity defense, competency to stand trial. Its ripples are still felt today.
And that brings us to a final, really unsettling thought.
The ultimate irony, perhaps. Here was a man whose entire pathology seemed rooted in isolation, in wanting to disappear into the memory of his mother, to literally merge with her.
Ezra, to possess her, become her.
Yet, through the sheer horror of his actions and the way culture seized upon them, he achieved the exact opposite. He didn't disappear. He gained this perverse, enduring immortality, not in Augusta's skin, but as the monster his obsession created, endlessly retold in fiction.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.